Good evening, everyone. Good evening. Good evening. Guessing you were not expecting to see me today. Filling in for Dakota tonight. I think he's doing something in Vegas. Maybe he won at the tables. Hopefully we see him for the rest of the week. But welcome to Slow Markets, everyone. I am Coach Jay. If this is your first time meeting you, glad to be here. First things first, anything we talk about today on the stream is for educational purposes only. Nothing is considered any type of investment or trading advice. We did share the risk disclosure. Please check that out on the Topstep website if you have not read through that yet. Oh, flight delay. There we go, Dakota. He's delayed on his flight. He'll be home tomorrow. Please read through that risk disclosure. Anything we say, again, is for educational purposes only. If you do decide to take any trades we talk about, you're doing so at your own risk. And shout out to the chat for all the welcomes today. Before we get started, I do want to plug our very own Coach Robert. Was on the ASFX podcast. He sat down with Austin Silver to talk about his trading, his journey. If you don't know Robert, he is a genius, to say the least. I've worked with Robert early on in my days at Topstep, kind of going through the coaching program and learning about how he automates a lot of his trading strategies. So I'm sure it'll be a pretty interesting podcast. I'm going to tune in. I'll be leaving comments there as well. So looking forward to that. The interview will be available starting Saturday, July 6th at 7 a.m. Central Time. And we should have the link in the chat. Thank you, Gabe, for posting that. So check that out. Saturday, 7 a.m. Central Time. Coach Robert sitting down with Austin Silver to talk trading. And it's a pretty good show. Austin has had a lot of Topstep guests on. MP was on there. He's had Nick Fortick on there. He's had Rips on there. So pretty good stuff. I think Austin's really good at what he does as far as getting stuff out of traders and getting conversations through them. So check that one out for sure. All right. So I'm new to doing this on my own, hosting the show, but I've watched a few episodes and I know one of the main focuses is this gold trade that happens right around 9 p.m. Eastern time. So I am checking this out right now. Right. I do have gold up. You should see my charts. And we're just going to watch. I'm going to do the same kind of rapid fire through the markets like Dakota does. But what I also want to do, and part of doing my own job, is providing levels for the Topstep daily levels. I want to go through maybe for a half an hour how I come up with those levels, right? My own process. It's nothing secret. You guys know, if you've heard me trade before, I use volume in all of my analysis. Those levels are based on some type of volume analysis. So we will go through that once we go through the rapid fire of the markets, and the levels that we put on today are going to be some of the levels that we use for that daily level sheet tomorrow. Of course, between now and the time that those levels get updated, there's about 12 hours. So if anything changes, I'll check them again in the morning to make sure, if I should update anything. But I'm going to assume that they're going to be pretty good. So for right now, what I have with gold, we'll just go right through it now. And if you guys see anything in the chat, if you see any markets start to move, do let me know. I'm okay switching over to it. I'm a momentum trader, so if something starts moving, I have no problem jumping over there and going with it. So let's see, gold on a 30-minute chart has been, and I use the 30-minute and the 3-minute for most of my analysis. Gold on the 30-minute chart for the last 6 days or so has been in, maybe not 6 days, maybe 4 days, has been in this kind of balance range. I'm calling the high of that range 23.45 to 23.50, right? So I'm going to mark that orange box there. And the low of the range is here, 23.30 to 23.27, right? So we can kind of see this market comes back down into this demand level, support, whatever you want to call it. We bounce right off of that, go right back into this supply, and back and forth over the last 3 days. Knowing that tomorrow is going to be a pretty quiet day, we have a half day, right? I'm not expecting too much as far as breakout moves, but if we're in these areas, this gives me the opportunity to limit my risk, right? So I don't want to take anything in the middle currently, but I will look for opportunities up at the highs of this range and down at the lows here. If we do get a breakthrough, then we adjust. I see in the chat we do have news tomorrow, right? So we have jobless claims coming out. I think there are a bunch of other numbers. There's a number out at 9 p.m. Central as well. So that could change anything, right? We're expecting it to be a quiet day, but we also have some of the biggest numbers out on the week. So, anything can happen, as Hoag says all the time. And we know that news can change the market sentiment in a heartbeat. So that's what I have with gold. Those have been my levels for pretty much the entire week so far. So I'm going to leave them there, right? If we see any movement, again, up at the highs in this supply or down at the lows here in this demand area, I will look to take a trade from there. And again, it gives me the opportunity to limit my risk. If I take a long at the high of this range, normally I wouldn't. I would look for somewhere around 50% of it to hold. But if we were to go long at the high of the range and risk the low on a one lot, that is risking just under $400, which is what I think is a proper risk for a gold trade, right? So if there are any questions on that, do let me know. I will switch over to the NASDAQ as well. Let's go to the NASDAQ from here. Here we have the NASDAQ. We have this supply area up here. If anyone was watching, when was this? This was Fast Markets on Friday. Fast Markets Friday, we had, we were looking to go long, and we were the guys that bought the highs. We kind of wicked up into the supply area and came right back down. We're in that zone again, right? We're trading right below it. And where does that level come from? If we look back, we have it up here, right? One check of this level, two checks of this level. This is a kind of blow off top move to our all-time highs and then right back down through it. And it's been a resistance since. Where we're opening up right now, we're kind of right under that level. Everything I have on here is a drawing, so I'll take these off so you can kind of see it a little more clearly. But we're opening up right below this supply, resistance, whatever you want to call it. I hesitate to use the word support or resistance because it already frames your trade, right? If I look at something as a resistance, most of us are going to say, well, it's a resistance, I should sell there. I think it's better to look at it as an area of opportunity because we've seen supports and resistances break all the time, right? So I'm just going to look at it and say, hey, how does the market respond when we get back to these levels? The last time, it was a resistance. This time, yet to be seen, right? And if we stay here, I'm going to be looking for those numbers tomorrow to see how we react here. If we push through, then the next area I'm looking at, of course, is this all-time high. Do we get that on a half day? We don't know, but this is the NASDAQ that we're talking about, and it does things we don't expect it to. So what I have here as far as levels, this supply zone up here is the low of it is 22.54. The high is 22.73. And there's a few other things I'm going to look at as well. I've been putting this on the daily levels since we had the print. And it is going to be an anchored VWAP to the CPI number. All right, CPI was on June 12th at 7:30 Central in the morning. So I'm going to anchor a VWAP to there. And if we zoom out, we can kind of see this level being somewhat important, right? Of course, it's not perfect, but we come up, check it. It's a resistance until we get back above it. Today, we traded above it. This is the New York session open. we trade it up above it, come back down and check it, and we push up to that supply. Now, the one thing I'm looking at with this angle of VWAP is it's flat, right? I've heard traders sometimes say, hey, you know, in a range-bound market, VWAP is kind of useless. Depends on how you look at it, right? In a range-bound market, if I'm looking at VWAP and it's a flat angle, what that's telling me is volume is not effective at pushing price, right? In either direction, right? Whether price goes up or it goes down, volume is not going with it, right? If this VWAP angle stays flat. So what that would tell me, at least on a higher time frame on this 30-minute chart, is the NASDAQ is a range-bound market, right? Volume, the market pushed up, volume didn't go with it. If I'm trading range-bound rules, right, we're fading the extremes, but I can't just go with that, right? I could, we talked about that with Deanna today on the market stalking about levels, right? Looking for the market at a level, but then the timing of it as well. I can't just say, hey, this is a resistance, I want to go short here, especially how I trade, right? I'm a volume trader. So this is not a trade that I would take here, but I'm looking at this area to potentially be resistant. The numbers here, I see the charts a little bit unclear. The range is, the low of the range is 2256. The high of it is 2273. Yep. I got a question here from Worldwide Worker. I say that $400 is good risk for a trade on gold. I'm assuming that's per mini contract. That's correct. Yeah, $400 with micros. You know, you could put your stop wherever you wanted to. You're probably not going to get hit. All right. Let's see what else I might be looking at in the NASDAQ. And again, if we see any markets moving, you guys want to switch back over to those, just let me know. I will go through crude oil as well. So what I'm seeing right now, as far as heavy delta goes, I'm not seeing a whole lot in the NASDAQ. Right? I'm just scanning and looking for, you know, this delta flow indicator down here to show me an anomaly, right? Something like this sticks out, right? So what I would do is frame out this candle and look at that as an area of opportunity, but we kind of traded through that. So I'm going to ignore that one. We have another one here, and I'll call out the levels on these when we have them. So this one marked out here, the high of the range is 2212. The low of it is 2187. All right, so this is something I would look at as an area of opportunity. If we get a pullback to this level and we hold, this is an area of opportunity, right? I may be looking to buy here if I see the market slow down. Obviously, we're going to need some selling to get us down there. But if it's not convinced selling, right? If it's not a heavy push of selling, I would be looking to maybe take some buys in this area here. And 50% of that is 50% of that range we just called out, right? 2212 at the high, 2187 at the low. 50% is right around 2200. Major psych level, right? Anyone who's trading the NASDAQ knows when we trade at these major levels, right? Anything that ends in a 00, we're going to pay attention to. So if I don't see the volume needed to trade through a major level, the sell side volume, that may give me an indication to take the trade in the opposite direction to the upside. All right. Right now, not going to do too much in the NASDAQ, but kind of mapping out these areas of opportunity. If we get down here and we hold again, looking to take a long. And I'm seeing questions pop up in the chat as they go. I'll try to get to them. I use order flow as well. What is the significance of high delta levels, and does it matter what time frame you're on? So for me, high delta is going to, it depends on how you read it, right? Let's go through a quick example here. This candle right here, right? And I'm using 3 minutes. You can use 5 minutes. You can use 30 minutes. Whatever time frame helps you make sense of the market. For me, it's a 3-minute chart. So how am I going to read this candle specifically? We had a 3-minute candle that had a 64-point range, right? The high of the candle is 2085. The low of the candle is 2025. And in that candle alone, there was negative 1078 delta. So the way I'm going to read that is sellers came in and were stronger in this candle. The second question I ask myself is, what were they able to get with that selling? Right? So and who might those sellers be? So if you were long from here, the market pushes up to 2100 and doesn't get through it, what might you do if you see it hesitate? You might sell. So we may have some longs closing their position. They need to sell to close. That might add to it. We may have some shorts opening positions, right? Where if you are looking to go short and the market pushes up to 2100 and it doesn't hit it, you might see that as a signal to go short. You might be selling in here as well. Now let's look at this through the eyes of the person who sold to open the position. If I sell to open here, I'm adding to this negative delta. If I sold at 2035 and the market stops at 2020, hesitates, what do I eventually have to do with that position as the market pushes back up, right? So when I'm seeing heavy delta, I want to read, are those trapped sellers or trapped buyers, or are they getting what they're looking for? If they're not getting what they're looking for, eventually they have to get out of the position, and we can see how the market starts to respect this level, right? We trade up through it, we start to trade back into it. Now, when I see the market trade back in here and it looks like we can't push lower, now what this heavy delta does is give me an opportunity to limit my risk, right? I may be able to limit my risk at the low of this candle. That's risking $870 with a one lot mini. If that's too expensive, there are micros available as well, but this is a market structure based stop, right? It's not based on, hey, I can only lose 200 bucks. If you can only lose 200 bucks, trade a contract size that allows you to lose the 200 and trade the market structure, right? Because if I set my stop under here, where I know sellers came in and failed, then what do I need to break through here? I need convinced sellers to break us back through. If they don't trade it, then that's fine, right? Then we continue going up. Not the easiest trade in the world, right? It did take a while. It came back and checked these levels once or twice. But we know that there were trapped sellers in here that could not push the market lower. What do we have? The anchored VWAP to CPI right at that level, which we know is a concrete level when it wants to be. So they sold, tried to, and that really set the low for the day at that point, right? We didn't trade lower than that candle all day and went in the opposite direction. And you can use volume if you don't have delta candles. Volume works similarly. The only difference with volume is you don't know if it was buy side or sell side. And delta charts are going to be available soon on Topstep X, not available as of yet. Got a question from James K. Is there a reason you went with 3-minute charts instead of 5-minute charts? No real reason. I think I've tried to make sense of why I use a 3-minute chart. It's an unconventional time, right? I know you either use a 1 or a 5. 3 minutes just helps me make sense of the markets, right? It's not too short. It's not a 1 minute where things are moving too fast, and it's not a 5 minute where things are too slow. It's kind of right in that middle. I'm also a boxing fan, so if you're a boxing fan, you know boxing rounds are 3 minutes. And the way I'm reading these delta numbers are like boxing stats, right? Are who's throwing the punches, right? Are they buyers or sellers? And are they winning rounds? Right. So each one of these candles is a 3-minute round. So if this seller threw 1,000 more punches and they were not able to get more than what they were looking for, then that seller's losing the fight, right? They threw a bunch of jabs that, barely hit their opponent, right? So that's what I'm looking for. All right. What else? What other markets do we want to look at? I know we spend a lot of time on the NASDAQ, but let's go to ES. Let's go to ES. ES, very similar to the NASDAQ as well. Let's go to a 30-minute chart. We know we have all-time highs. We checked them, and I really think this is the reason the NASDAQ came down so hard the other day. We were trading the NASDAQ on fast markets, but I was looking at ES on the side saying, hey, the ES is pretty close to making all-time highs. When it rejected, the NASDAQ just turned around right away. All-time high in the ES is 55.88 is what I'm seeing on this chart here. Right, so that's obviously going to be one level. 55.88. We're only a few points away from that. Gold's moving, I'm seeing. Okay, so let's go back. Who said gold's moving? I guess if we look at it like this, right? That was a move. It's pretty close. I guess so. But if we see continued selling, please let me know. I actually meant to turn on I have tick strike, and I think tick strike would be pretty good at a time like this, right? Because I don't have to watch a bunch of charts. I can just see, hey, something is moving, right? There's volume, there's price action happening, and I can go to that. But if we see some more selling, gold move the tick, right? If we see some more selling, let me know. But this may be a good spot, right? I know Dakota would look at this like, this is a supply area up here, right? This is kind of a resistance, this 2340. So if you want to go short here, I'm not that type of trader, right? I'm not that type of trader because although this does look like a decent resistance, it feels a little bit like a 50-50, right? Like anything can happen when volume when volume comes in. So for me, I might sacrifice trade location a little bit in order to get a confirmation that the move is happening. So let's go back to ES. We'll plot out some levels for the ES. Again, I'm kind of doing the job that I would have to do early in the morning, just doing a little bit tonight, but giving you guys a little bit of an idea of how I come up with these levels for the Topstep daily levels, right? So I have 55.88 up here, which is the all-time high. Let's go to a daily chart real quick. And I'm going to look at the daily ATR, which is 47 points. The way I'm going to measure this, and again, this might change, but for right now, we have a 5-point range. So just measure it from the low. Currently, 43 points would put us at, let's go with 46 points. I'm going to measure from this low up to 46 points. That would put us at 56.07. Right, so I'm going to mark that out. That's in range. If this stays the low, that's in range for a daily ATR. Now we know markets usually don't just go straight up and end on the highs, so that range might extend. Depending on what we do overnight, I'll adjust these levels closer. But then if this stays the high, we have 43 points to the low side, which brings us back to 55.20. Those levels are not going to stay there. And again, we don't normally just trade in one direction the entire range. So I'm assuming that those both are going to come in a little bit tighter, right? But a 5-point range right now, there's not much to do with that. So that's a level I'll probably revise tomorrow. What else do we have? Let's go to a 3-minute chart. The numbers are very small. Let me see if I can change this. Give me 1 second. Let's see if I can change the numbers. Price scale. Is that better? We'll move all this stuff out of the way. How's that? Hook me up with a free reset. Hook me up with a free reset, right? For filling in for slow markets, I need a free reset too. But no, I don't have the powers to do that. Topstep did a bunch of giveaways last week, which were amazing. Hopefully everybody took advantage of that. But I have no free resets. I don't have those powers. Let's see. So we have some positive delta down here, right? I might mark out this zone as an area of opportunity, right? We see about 3 or 4 positive delta candles here. The range on that is 55.39 to 55.48. So I'm going to look at that and see if the market comes back into this level. How does it react? And why am I looking at those? Is because, we had a buy side imbalance. And a lot of times we see these imbalances get filled. So we may trade back down here and use it as an area of opportunity. Right now, these levels, they can be an area to take a trade or targets, right? And know that on any of the Topstep levels, right? Hoag this morning had a daily level, a weekly kickoff high in the NASDAQ at 2230. If we look at where the trend on the NASDAQ started, we were 200 points away from that. But if we're seeing how the market is trading, right, and this is our 3-minute opening range from here, right, this is where we open. We had an opening range breakout. It's not unreasonable to use those as profit targets, right? So a lot of times I think we look at the levels and say, hey, should I be taking a trade here? But if we waited to take a trade up at 22.30, it wasn't a good trade, right? But if I'm looking at this and I'm getting in along and I'm saying, and I'm taking all these things into consideration, right? You guys just heard me use the daily ATR, right? Daily ATR is a great range to look at to tell you whether or not there's potential still left in a move, right? The daily ATR on the NASDAQ is it fluctuates around 250 to 260. So if it's early on in the day and it looks like potential for a range for a trending day, and we only spent 70 points of that range, and I know that there's 260 available, the market looks like it's going to trend. We only spent 70 points. 260 minus 70 tells me that there's 190 points available in a potential trend, right? So it's not unreasonable to set a profit target that's that far up. Now, again, it's a potential profit target. I'm not saying it's easy to hold a trade to that level, but that might help you stay in trades a little bit longer, right? So if I entered the trade down here, where were our lows on the day at that point? Our lows on the day were here. 260 points would put us at 2170. It's not an unreasonable profit target. And we had a range expansion day, right? Because we don't always have average range days. Sometimes we have range contraction. Sometimes we have range extension. So on a day like today, if I would have used that daily ATR calculation from this low, it's not unreasonable to set a profit target at 2170 if I get long here at 20,000. It's 170 points. Now, again, it's hard to hold a trade that long, right? I'll be the first one to admit it. Can I hold a trade for 3 hours in the NASDAQ sitting through all these pullbacks? Probably not, right? It doesn't happen. My hold times are not that long, but it's not unreasonable. So I can open up my profit targets and maybe not need to scalp. Now, if the market is showing me it's going to have a range contraction day, right, where we have a range bound day where the NASDAQ only trades 100 points high to low, then those are the days where I'm thinking, see profit, take profit, 20 point scalps and I'll get out of the trades. So, use those in your calculations, right? What personality does the day have, right? Is it a range bound day? Is it a trending day? And if it's a trending day, where can I set reasonable profit targets for my trades? All right. Let me see if I have any questions. Nothing so far. Can I explain a little bit more about my strategy? Yeah. So Vladimir, my strategy is all volume based, right? All volume based. What an entry looks like for me. I want to see a couple of things, right? So first thing I'm going to do every morning is frame out the 3-minute opening range. And I'm going to anchor a VWAP. Let me remove all the drawings so we can see this clearly. First thing I'm going to do, frame out the 3-minute opening range, anchor VWAP to that opening range. Again, I would have had levels marked out, but we're going with exactly the trade. So the first thing I want to know is I see the market like this. How do we respond to this opening range? If we're trading opening range breakouts, I know a lot of people take, the initial break is the trade. I've done that and seen kind of my own numbers, and they're not good for my own trading, right? And maybe it's because I'm looking for bigger trades and not scalps as much. But really what I want to see is a close outside of that range in either direction, right? We had a close outside to the high of the range, and VWAP is starting to go with it. So this is not just price action, right? Volume is going with it, which tells me that there are buyers. Still not an entry signal yet, because I have to wait for a close outside of the range. And this is when I'm trading at my best. Guys, I don't always trade at my best. Sometimes I take a lot of trades. But ideally, this is what I want to do. We see a close outside the range, a test and rejection of acceptance back inside the range, right? Where we reject here and bounce. And now I'm looking to hold this trend because volume is in my favor, right? Volume has left the range as well. Price is now rejecting that range. This is an entry signal for me. Maybe I don't get in exactly at the high, but somewhere in this candle gives me an opportunity to limit risk. And I want to try to hold that trend as long as it continues, right? what I normally do is trail the market up, where if it's going to come back to my entry, I'd rather take some money off the table and just get back into a trade if it's still a good trade. But then that's it from there. So I'm seeing we have some news coming out. Is that right? Got some Australian news. Gold starting to sell a little bit. Do I ever look at the Nikkei? I don't. I don't. I've looked at it before, but being a volume trader, it doesn't trade enough volume for me. Trading the Nikkei, I think you have to trade it level to level, which makes a lot of sense. But I haven't found any consistency myself with trading it. One second, I'm just going to get a drink real quick. I don't know how Dakota does this every day. It's a lot of talking, and we're only a half hour in. Let's go back to the ES. We'll finish doing levels on the ES. We know we have the all-time high, 55.88. Let's anchor a VWAP to CPI. And that is, again, another pretty flat angle for this anchored VWAP to CPI, right? We see it trending here, but over the last 12 days, it's been pretty flat. And this is a range-bound market, right? Now, it's a decent enough range to trade, right? I don't want to say range-bound market in the sense that I'm not going to look at this market to trade because it's not giving us an opportunity, but it's not a market that's showing breakout potential yet because volume isn't going with it, right? That's the way I'm reading this. So again, we might be at the highs of this range. The real high is up here at 55.80, what do we call it? The all-time high. 55.88, was that right? We could look at this zone here, 55.68 to 55.73. Right, where we may reject here. And then to the downside, I'm going to take this off because we traded through this. Actually, let me leave this on for a second. So this was a level that I looked at this morning, right? I marked this out this morning. And why did I use this one? Because we had this. Did I use this morning? No, it wasn't. That's just me not cleaning my charts. Ignore that one. This was a level at some point because it was an unfilled imbalance, right? We see selling. We didn't trade all the way back up through the highs. So at one point, this was a level because I'm looking for it to trade through. Once it trades through, I should be taking these off, but I don't trade the ES often, so it was still there. But right now, what I would have as a level is 55.37, which is the anchored VWAP from CPI. Pretty much a flat angle. So a potential trade back down towards this is what I would be looking for if I see selling come in at these highs and no buying. All right. Any other markets? Oh, we did have a question about crude, right? Not cleaning the charts is like not taking the trash out. Yeah, I just forget sometimes, right? I have it set as a hotkey where I just, if it gets too crowded, I'll just do a Shift Alt D and remove everything. But also, sometimes not cleaning charts gives you areas of opportunity, especially in range bound markets, right? Where a lot of times I'm looking at updating that Topstep daily level sheet and the same levels apply, right? I might have to change the names of them, right? Where it was yesterday's point of control and it's still today's point of control because range bound markets aren't giving us a lot of opportunity. How do you compute the ATR? Do you subtract or add to the last price or the open? Tanya, good question. So the ATR, I'm going to use an ATR indicator. I have it down here at the bottom of my chart. You can see it. I have it minimized where I don't really care about, this is what it normally shows. It shows this line. I don't care about this line. I just care about the value that it's giving me, right? So I have this minimized on the bottom of my chart. And you can see as I hover over the candles, it's changing the numbers. right? So the way I'm looking at this and what I did for the daily, right? Let's go to the daily now. The daily ATR is showing me the value is 46, right? The value is 46. So what I'm going to do in that calculation, I'm going to look at the entire range of this candle, right? This is a daily candle. Look at the low and the high and measure it from there. So from the high, if I want to know what's in range from the current high, I'm measure this high down to this low here, 46 points. All right. If I want to know to the upside what that range is, I'm going to measure the low, 46 points to the high, and that's it. You can that ATR value is going to change depending on the time frame that you're trading. So on a 3-minute chart, where that ATR was 8 points for the ES on a 30-minute, on a 3-minute chart it might be 1.5 points. All right, so hopefully that makes sense. Any other questions? At what point in the day can you tell what kind of day is it going to be, range bound or trend? It seems like it will be too late once you notice what type of day it is. Sean Walker, great question. I have a document that I'll see if I can share. I'm going to put it in Discord because it'll take me some time to find it. But there's a document that I can share, and there's a couple of things you want to take into account, right? The first thing I'm going to take into account, if we understand how averages work, right? If we understand how averages work, right, we get a daily ATR. That is, I'm on the ES right now, so we'll focus on ES. The daily ATR on the ES is 46 points. This is how I'm going to calculate it. First thing I want to know, actually, let me see. Give me 1 second. Let me see if I can find this document, and then we'll just look through it because I haven't brought this up in a while, and it probably needs to be updated as well. But there's some good information on there. I'll update it and I'll put this in the Topstep Discord. I just found it. Let's see if it loads. Some of you have probably seen this. I put it in the Topstep Discord maybe a year ago. It feels like now. I'll put it in my chat in the Discord, in the Coach J chat. But I want to know a couple of things, right? If the daily ATR is 46 points, I'm going to look at what happened the day prior. So this was today, right, where we had 67 points. The day prior to it, we had a 36.5 point range. So if I know that the daily ATR is 46 points and we have a below average day one day, I can go with the assumption that if we are going to stay at that average of 46, at some point, if we have an outlier to the downside, we need to see an outlier to the upside, right? We had a 36 point range day on Friday. Yesterday we had and today we had a 67 point range day. See in the chat say gold is moving. Gold short is working, right? And that was the perfect Dakota short, right? Where you find a level, you take the level, you trade it, right? Now I'm seeing volume coming in, and I want to see if there's an opportunity to continue to trade this. Anyone in that gold short right now? Been in it, Trenchcoat Trader, nice trade. So what I see, we're kind of breaking out of this 30-minute Globex opening range. Right, we got a couple traders in it. Nice trade, everybody. Tried to tell you. It is hard to see all the comments, but if you try to tell me and you have a good trade like that, DM me on the side. I'll promise I'll read it. Just joking. Very nice trade though. And it looks like there's room down, right? We talked about these levels, right? If it's going to continue to trade and that was now the high of the range, there's potentially another 7 points available in this trade right now. How is the market going to get there? It's going to decide. What I am seeing right now is if we look at VWAP since the session opened, it's pretty flat, right? Where we are seeing some selling starting to come in here, but it may not be enough for me, at least, to move price. But nice short if you were in it. Again, you can pick levels and say, hey, the market's going to trade from this level to this level. Not my style of trade, but that's the beauty of trading, right? There are as many ways to do this as there are people. And I think what matters to most of us is that we manage our risk the whole way through. Do I have my Series 3? I do not. I am going to study for that because I do want to be licensed, and Topstep is, offering to sponsor it, and it just makes us all look better as coaches. So I will be getting it this year. All right, let me see if there are any other questions. If you do have a question that I did not get to in the chat, what books do I recommend? Good question. I do recommend Brian Shannon's Anchored VWAP book. My favorite trading books are the Market Wizards books, if you've ever read those by Jack Schwager. They're not so much about strategy. It's a lot about, a trader talking through their process. The Market Wizards books I think are really cool because he asks the traders all similar questions. And what I like to do in my own journey was the questions that he asked the traders, I sat down and asked myself those same questions, imagining I was interviewing with Jack Schwager, right? So if I had to answer all the questions that he asked those traders in that book, what would be my answer and how would I get to there? Those are all really cool. I think there's 4 or 5 of them, and they're all really good. They're all really good. Best Loser Wins, obviously a good one. I think we're going to get Tom Hoagland on Topstep soon. I heard MP mention that. It's a really good one as well. And then try to read some non-trading books, right? Something that has nothing to do with trading at all, but you could potentially learn from. I think one of my favorite books I read last year was like 50 Cent's autobiography book. I forgot what it was called, but he like talked about his process of going from like kid from Queens to, running shows on huge networks and making a ton of money and investments and all those things. So some non-trading books I would suggest as well. What else do we have here? So I have a question for anybody that's in the gold trade. If you want to tag me in it, what's your plan with this trade, right? Do you just hold it? Do you have a profit target, or is it a time stop? I know for myself, I normally use a time stop where, and it's part of the reason I don't trade slow markets that much because it takes a lot of time and I'm just not that patient, right? I'd rather go to sleep and not have to think about anything than having a trade on. That's just me personally, but how do you guys trade this? Would like to know. Target 23,448. I think I read that right. 23,34.8. Okay. I don't know why that was so hard to read, but somewhere down here. Okay. Reasonable profit target. I can see that. Especially if we break down again. The way I like to set to set profit targets is have a conservative one first and then have that stretch target, right? Where do I think the market could go all the way back down to this demand? But if it's not going there, then where could I take profits somewhere in the middle? So I get it. My thoughts on moving a stop loss. I try to move my stop loss only after a specific event, right? So let's say I'm risking on a NASDAQ trade. Let's say I'm risking 20 points. If the market moves 20 points, I don't want to take the trade off, then I'll consider starting to move that stop, right? Ideally, where I want to move it is if I'm risking 20 and we move 20, I want to start to think about moving it. But let's say it moves 30. After it moves that 30, I might move it to 20, where I'm covering my next loss on that trade because I'm risking about 20 points on every NASDAQ trade. But then it's going to be market structure, right? I want to find some market structure to kind of hide behind. We talked about it before in the NASDAQ, where we had this heavy selling coming in. And I know that if we get back below this level, we need to see more selling. If that happens, it happens, great. But if I was long from here and I see this heavy selling, I'm going to trail to somewhere under here, maybe not to the tick because we know how often the market likes to revisit levels. But if I was long down here and I get ticked out on a trail here, it happens. But trying to find some market structure after the market goes in my direction. But good question. Any other questions we have? What time do we got? We got about 15 minutes left. Any other questions? Any other markets we want to discuss? I think we went through a couple. Hopefully you have some levels going into tomorrow. Again, those levels are going to be on the Topstep daily levels as well. I'll review what we did tonight and maybe add some. Let's see, NASDAQ looking down. Yeah. Yes, it is. I'm going to be honest with you guys. I find it very hard to trade these. When you guys are in here learning from Dakota, learning slow markets, I am as well, right? Because it's not my style of trading. But it is selling. I just, anytime I see, hey, this market is breaking down, the first thing I go to is the volume that is trading. And normally during the day session, if the NASDAQ is trading 102 contracts in a 3-minute candle, I'm going to go take my dogs outside. But that's what you need to do in these markets, right? Where we set a range, right? This yellow line up here is measuring the first 30 minutes of the session open, right? These two yellow lines. We rejected at the high of that range, and it's a nice trade. Got a question from Trade MNQ. Coach Jay, when should I move from MNQ to NQ? Currently in a 150K XFA and only have built up $500. Well, if you trade MNQ, if you move to NQ, you're going to have to change your YouTube name. So only move to the NQ when you're ready to change your YouTube name. But really, do it when you're comfortable. Do it when you're comfortable, right? If you've only built up that $500 and that's not enough of a buffer, right? Do it. Build up your account to the point where you don't have to think about the drawdown, right? Going from, and I don't know how many MNQ contracts you're trading, but if you're trading 5 MNQ and then you want to go to 1 NQ, that's doubling your risk, right? You hear the risk managers say it all the time. The biggest increase in your risk management is going to be from 1 contract to 2, right? Doubling your size. So truly, make sure that you're comfortable with that added risk, that double risk. And sometimes I think when traders make that change, right, when you scale up, we don't want to scale back because we've already upgraded to that level. But be conscious of that, right? Where if it's changing your trading and you're thinking about money, you have to scale back down, right? Because that's changing your whole process, right? If you're able to trade the charts and not think about the dollar amount, you're good where you're at. The minute you start thinking about the dollar amount, you're trading too big. Because that shouldn't matter, right? We obviously all trade for money. We're here to make money from trading, but if trading is the first thing on your mind, it's very hard to trade, right? Because you're focusing on your pockets, you're focusing on how you're going to spend the money, you're focusing on, if I lose this money, what am I not going to be able to pay for? Those are all high pressure thoughts to have while we are doing a high performance thing, right? So if that scale up changes your mindset, you have to scale back down. All right. Could you break down your entry process? Yeah, here it is. I'm a momentum trader again, so I'm going to try to find something like this, right? I may wait all of this. I'm going to find something like this. Let's try to keep this as simple as possible. And I've been talking about this a little bit in Discord as well. For me, if I had to simplify my process as much as I can, I'm going to look at major levels and see how the market responds to those major levels, right? Daniel Dykstra, my entry process is weird volume stuff. Daniel's always in Discord with me, so he knows that I'm going to, I'm going to pick a chart, somebody pick a market, and we'll kind of go through it and see. Let's look at soybeans, right? I'm going to look at soybeans and try to find, from the time the market opened, try to find some high volume event. I'm going to frame out that high volume event and see how the market trades around those areas. We had heavy selling here. If I don't see follow through, this is telling me there's an opportunity to take a trade in the opposite direction, right? Here's another one. We have heavy selling here, and then right after it, this is telling me that there's no volume pushing us in any direction. There's not a trade here, right? This is telling me range bound market. We have heavy buying here, no follow through. This is giving me an area to potentially take a short. If we have no follow through, my risk is going to be on the other side of this and potentially take a short this way. Right. So hopefully that makes sense. And, I talk a lot more about my process and, how I'm looking at trades during the At the Buzzer segment. So if this is your first time, with me in a class today, thank you for joining. Thank you for having me as the guest host, as Dakota is out today with a delayed flight. But check us out in At the Buzzer. I do it with Coach Paul every day at 3 p.m. Central Time in Discord right after the market closes. And we talk a lot about our process there. When did I start trading? 10 years ago. What got me interested in trading? My parents talking about the shares in Apple that they owned and me wanting to make a whole bunch of money. And I didn't. I have no reset codes. What else do we got here? Daniel, I'm not reading that comment. What else do we got? We got about 10 minutes left. If there are any questions, do let us know. I think I heard Gabe in the background there somewhere. Shout out to Gabe for sticking around producing tonight. So I didn't have to do it myself in front of however many people are watching right now and kind of fumble through that. So thank you, Gabe, on that one. Still think LeBron is better than Jordan. I think LeBron solidified himself as the GOAT in basketball by getting his son drafted. Shout out to Michael Jordan, amazing basketball player. You are number 2 because LeBron was able to get his son a spot in the league. How old am I? I'm 30 until I'm 40. That was the most practical way of using the volume bars I've ever heard. Thank you. William Casey, no problem, right? And just a reminder, these aren't exactly volume bars, right? These are delta flow bars, but they're similar, right? It's showing me where heavy delta comes in. And all I want to do is frame out that area where the market was interested in and potentially take a trade from there, right? So I'm going to use, and it's all relative, right? Relative to the volume that just came in, that's heavy delta. Here's another one. Here's heavy delta. How does the market trade that range? Is it respecting 50% of the range? Does it trade down to it? Does it trade through it? Because I know buyers came in here, right? So let's imagine what those buyers are thinking. If you're buying with enough size to push the market around, when we trade back to your prices, are you defending that position or are you going to let it trade through? Right? If you let it trade through, you're not defending your position anymore, then we're going down. But these buyers, whoever they are in here, and I'm just going with an assumption, right? We don't know what anyone's intentions are. But if I'm assuming that they're buying to open positions and I see the price respect these levels, then these buyers are protecting this position, gives me an opportunity to limit my risk at the low, and we can trade up from there. Use TradingView, what indicators you like. I don't use TradingView. I haven't used it much. And I think it's because it's not a platform that I was comfortable trading on. So I do all my charting and trading on the same platform. Have I watched ICT content? I've watched some of it, more so to familiarize myself with what other traders are talking about. And I know there's a lot of overlap, right? I see traders, when I frame out things like this, they're like, oh, he's using ICT strategies. The best thing about trading is whatever strategy you use, right? Hoag doesn't use anything I use. A lot of times we have the same levels. Why? Because we're all looking at the same markets. So I know there's that whole ICT is cultish and people are against it. Find whatever works for you. And the thing that makes a market great is you need somebody to have a different viewpoint than you for the markets to move, right? If we all traded the same exact thing and we said, hey, this is the right way and everyone should trade the right way, price would never move. So just keep that in mind. Delta flow bars are not on Topstep X yet. They're on the way. Amateur Genius, I appreciate you. Do I have a preferred time frame? Great question. So whose podcast is that? I think it's I can't remember whose podcast it is, but they ask the question all the time. If you only had one time frame and one indicator to use, what would it be? For me, it would be a 3-minute chart and this delta flow indicator. I think if I took everything else off my charts, I could be okay, right? Think of that in your own trading, right? If you only could have one chart, one time frame, and one indicator, you had to simplify your trading to that much, what would it be, right? Can you spot a fake out move in one direction, seeing volume somehow? Yeah, you can, right? So, and I guess, how do you define a fake out, right? How do you define a fake out where, let's again go back to this example here in the NASDAQ. We see the chart like this. We see the chart like this. Then the very next candle is selling. What am I thinking here, right? Because I don't know what's going to happen afterwards. I see heavy delta coming in. I know that we just traded through these levels, and this is what my chart, this is exactly what my chart would look like seeing this, right? I would have this candle framed out. Why? Because that's the first 3-minute opening range. I would have an anchored VWAP here because I do that every day. So if I see this, how am I reading this when it comes in? We tested to the, all this is to me is a test of the high of the opening range. Is that a fake out? Is it a false breakdown? Potentially. But for me, looking for opening range breakout trades, I'm looking for the opening range high to hold. VWAP left the opening range to the high. This is a lot of selling. So the next thing I'm going to do is frame out this candle as we get the next one printing. Is this a false move? I don't know if it's a false move or not, but it's giving me an area to limit risk. The high of the opening range looks like it's holding. I might potentially take a long somewhere in here. I can risk, for me, I need to risk about 20 points on the NASDAQ with my trade location, right? 20 points is about right. If that sounds expensive, you could always trade micros and just go from there. But you can read false moves, right? Because look at this one. Let's consider this a false breakdown. The market sold off 60 points. What you want to check for is follow through, right? There's no follow through in this selling here. This one here, we have buy side, right? Buy side imbalance, 659 positive delta in this candle. The very next candle, we have limited selling, right? Negative 156, weren't very effective at moving price with that selling. The next candle, we have follow through. The next candle, same thing, limited selling, upside, follow through. This is real buying. This was real selling, but what type of selling is it? Is it initiative sellers taking control of the market and pushing it lower? If they tried, they failed, right? They met buyers down here. Could be profit taking, right? We don't know. So it's important, especially when you see big volume like this, to look at what happens after the fact, right? If someone comes in and market sells 1,000 contracts in this, they may just be getting out of position, but there may not be other market participants in there that says we need to continue lower, right? So you want to pay attention to that follow through action from there. And again, we don't put on any guarantees in the market. We put on risk and establish your risk from there. So if you trade this during this time of the day, do you know that it's going to continue higher? Nope. But I told you I always go with conservative price targets. If I was long here, my first price target would be the high of that candle because I know that's where selling came in, right? I could have a 200-point profit target like we talked about, which is reasonable, but I have to have a conservative one also because selling came in here. So if I trade back up to this high and we don't get buyers, I need to start thinking about trade management. All right. Ms. J said this price action is not for you. It's not for me either. You can hear I did not talk about taking a trade at all. Not my price action as well, but you know, sometimes we don't, just because we're looking at the charts doesn't mean we have to place a trade, right? I'm plotting out levels for tomorrow, right? Where I'm either going to do this at 7:30 tomorrow morning, or we can do it now. So anytime you sit at your desk, you know, make it useful, right? And useful doesn't always have to be taking a trade. All right, we got about a minute left. Thank you everyone again for joining. I did get to read all the comments. I watch any segment that I'm on Topstep TV at least 4 or 5 times, kind of like game film to review if there's anything that I can improve. And in doing that, I read all the comments as well. But I just want to say, appreciate everyone joining, sticking around tonight. I know it was not a normal show, filling in for Dakota, but thanks again, everyone, for joining. Remember, just give that plug one more time. ASFX podcast, Coach Robert with Austin Silver, Saturday, July 6th at 7 a.m. Central Time. Hear all about Coach Robert's story. And remember, tomorrow's a half day. Tomorrow is a half day. So if you make your money early, leave it. Go do something else. Go start the holiday early. Do some, shopping for your barbecues, whatever you're going to do. Shout out to Luffy, hopefully I said your name right, our mod for tonight, sending me all the questions. But remember, tomorrow is a half day. Don't try to be a hero. If you make $5 tomorrow, call it, right? If you lose a little bit, you're not going to have the end of the show to make it back up. End of the market to make it back up, right? You have an hour to trade, 1 p.m. Eastern time. The markets are closed. Just remember that, right? All your trades need to be closed before that. Thursday's a holiday. Enjoy some time off of the charts. Come back Friday for a full session. All right. Thank you again, everyone. Trade well, and we'll talk to you soon.